Day one, baby.
Day one.
To this day.
To this day. To this day.
To this day.
We're covering today's top boxing news. Okay, we'll start with this one. Charlo had this to say. He says, nobody cares about Demetrius Andrade for his fights or his belt.
But they care about Juan Montiel?
He was quoted as saying, what I do is what I do for a living, and that's fight. They're doing a great job of keeping him active, I guess. He has great technique. He's a durable guy who can be in with a big puncher like me. He has one of those awkward styles that I don't really see as a threat. Sergey Devianchenko posed a bigger threat than Andrade probably would. But being in a southpaw stance, it's not so much about styles, it's how we can get those matchups to be made between two world champions and two unification bouts. It's something I've always been interested in. Man, we're not dodging anybody. We're not
Ducking anybody.
We don't pick the fights, and we don't handle the agreements. You guys gotta understand that. It's part of boxing. They're watering down the sport. I care about Charlo.
Wow.
They ain't never gonna give me my credit, so I'll fight who they put in front of me. And who is they? Because last I checked, I thought Charlo was his own boss.
Ain't he?
I thought he was the promoter.
Who are they?
So I'll fight who they put in front of me. Who is this they? What happened to Lions Only? I got a big family, big life. Demetrius Andrade ain't living nothing like me. The opportunity is for him. I'm the lotto ticket in his ballpark, said Charlo. Nobody knows Demetrius Andrade, and they know Juan Montiel. Nobody knows when he fights, and they know when Juan Montiel fights. And nobody cares when he fights, but they care when Juan Montiel fights. He ain't getting no views. Nobody cares. He ain't like that when it comes, so he's just talking. You know, maybe Canelo Alvarez can get away with taking the piss out of Demetrius Andrade and his father when they decide to crash his post-fight press conference. Maybe he can do that. Maybe he can afford to do that because Canelo Alvarez has regularly fought
Champions.
better fighters than the fighters that Demetrius Andrade has fought. If you're Canelo, you can afford to take the piss out of Andrade because you've already fought more accomplished fighters than Demetrius Andrade, and you fight better fighters than the fighters
He fights.
that Demetrius Andrade fights on a regular basis. Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders. Those would easily be career best wins for Demetrius Andrade. Any one of those guys that Canelo Alvarez regularly fights. So if you're Canelo, you can get away with saying this kind of stuff and not come under fire, not take the heat for it. But if you're Charlo, your next fight is against the very unheralded Juan Montiel. You can't get away with saying this kind of stuff. You're in no position to talk. The problem with downplaying Demetrius Andrade as a fighter,
For Jamal.
the problem with downing him, his resume, is that they're going to compare him to whoever it is you're fighting. And if whoever it is you're fighting, whoever that is, they don't stack up to Demetrius Andrade, then you just make yourself look like a fucking idiot. You make yourself look like a fucking fool. And you make yourself look like you're avoiding Demetrius Andrade. Because when you say what you're saying, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, all the wordplay in the world and all the whataboutisms in the world isn't going to help make Charlo versus Montiel a fight that people are interested in.
It's not.
Look at the viewing figures for the Neri versus Figueroa fight that came out just a few days ago. Now that was a higher quality matchup comparatively than Charlo versus Montiel. It featured two unbeaten fighters, one of which was a world champion at the weight. And the viewing figures for that fight weren't encouraging at all. So how much more attention do you think Charlo is going to get fighting the likes of Juan Montiel? Especially on a date when so many other cards are supposed to be going down. You know, George Kambosos versus Teofimo Lopez is going down that day. I think Jaime Munguia's fighting that day as well. Top Rank's got a card. Maybe if the fight were going down on Fox as opposed to Showtime, it would get
Good ratings.
more viewership, because, you know, Fox is a free-to-air network. Everybody's got access to Fox, whereas Showtime, that's a premium cable network that couldn't get decent views for Adrian Broner's last outing, couldn't get decent views for Neri versus Figueroa, a higher quality matchup than this is, that featured two unbeaten fighters. Charlo swapping punches, supposed to be swapping punches with a guy that Jaime Munguia beat 4 years ago. How many of Jaime's old opponents is Charlo Charlo gonna keep feasting on? Dennis Hogan, Juan Montiel.
He's making every excuse in the book to avoid Andrade.
What does he think? That he's Canelo Alvarez? That because Canelo cracks wise on Demetrius Andrade that he can afford to do the same? You can't afford to do the same thing. You're facing the same scarcity of uninteresting opponents that Demetrius Andrade is. Any one of yous would be lucky to swap punches with somebody that Canelo fought. Lord only knows you're still chasing around Gennady Golovkin. Canelo fought him twice where either of yous would be lucky to fight that guy once.
Who fucks Jamal Charlo to turn his nose up at Demetrius Andrade?
And what's with this, I'll fight whoever they put in front of me? Who is they? Because I thought that Jamal Charlo said that he's his own boss, and he's got his own promotional company.
Lions only.
What is Lions only? What is that exactly? If you're not the guy brokering the deals, making the fights, and making the decisions, then who is?
Tom Brown's listed as the promoter for Charlo's next fight.
Him and Samson Lukowicz. I don't see anything about Lions only in there. There's been this misconception the last couple of years now that all those fighters over there on PBC Island, they have the kind of freedom that other fighters don't have when nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing. Those guys get told what to do. Jamal Charlo is proof of that because he fights who they put in front of him. And who are they?
Who's they?
Who? Tom Brown, Samson Lukowicz, Al Heyman, Bill Wenger. Who's they?
Doesn't sound like this guy's his own boss.
Demetrius Andrade, of his own admission, and his promoters. He can go where he wants for a fight. If he wants to have a fight on DAZN, he can have a fight on DAZN. If he wants to go over there to Fox or Showtime, he can have it there. But Jamal Charlo, he can't say the same. He can't jump ship. He can't leave the island.
Nope.
He can only fight where they tell him to fight, when they tell him to fight, against whoever they want him to fight. Jamal Charlo is treated like a piece of property, and he won't say that himself, but read between the lines. What, Juan Montiel's a better fight than a Demetrius Andrade fight?
Really?
You think people are more interested in seeing that?
Yeah, we'll find out soon enough.
Once those viewing figures are in, to be completely honest, I don't know how long this is going to go on with Jamal Charlo, because he doesn't seem receptive to an Andrade fight. He doesn't seem receptive to a David Benavidez fight. David Benavidez, who's on the same side of the street as him. I don't know how long it's going to take for him to win the Canelo Alvarez sweepstakes.
Wouldn't hold my breath.
And the same applies to Gennady Golovkin. I mean, they must be filling this guy's head with some serious fucking shit for him to be turning his nose up at a Demetrius Andrade fight. That's one of the most realistic fights he can have right now. That would get him some attention, but he just doesn't want it. He doesn't want to know. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Tyson Fury on Deontay Wilder. You had a boxing lesson the first time, humiliation. Then you had an absolute destruction. I hate to think what he's going to get the next time. I'm going to have 2 sets of knuckle dusters in my gloves. This time, pussy.
Referencing Glovegate, are we?
For another tweet from Michael Benson, Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 contracts are expected to be signed in the coming days. Bob Arum has said, parties have now reportedly verbally agreed to terms with July 24th in Vegas, the target date, and August 14th also a possibility. By now, most of you that follow this channel will know that I think there's more going on here than meets the eye, though at this point, it's besides the point. You'll notice that Tyson Fury said he'll have knuckle dusters in his gloves this time, referencing Glovegate, the controversy that ensued shortly after the second fight between them ended. A controversy that really never went further than social media, YouTubers looking to propagate the conspiracy for profit. This conspiracy was fed to them by Deontay Wilder and his team. That much we know by now. It's not a coincidence that when Deontay Wilder finally emerged from exile, hiding, whatever you want to call it, his accusations
Glovegate
were in keeping with everything we heard month to month.
after the second fight.
How many times did you see Tate Jones making video appearances on channels run by the usual suspects to help sell this conspiracy theory, propagate it, that Deontay Wilder had medical evidence of foul play in both of those fights, the second fight and the first fight? How many video appearances did you see that guy making on those channels? And how many of those channels pumped out video after video after video? Several videos on a daily basis, all about the same thing.
Glovegate.
What were and what still are unsubstantiated claims ahead of what's supposed to be the third fight. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that this was a conspiracy that was manufactured in order to help sell a third fight. You have to understand, the first fight ended in a draw, and the second fight was supposed to settle it. With the second fight having had the aesthetic and the outcome that it had, that left no need for a third. Thus, in order to sell a third,
You're gonna have to come at it from some other angle.
so you think the guy cheated in not only the second fight, but the first one too. The first one as well. You think this guy cheated, and your plan of action is to give him a third opportunity to cheat? Because if he did cheat in the first two fights, he cheated and got away with it. You haven't done nothing about it. And your plan is to give him a third opportunity.
What's stopping him from cheating again?
No actual investigation was mounted based on Deontay Wilder's accusations. Deontay Wilder himself never produced medical evidence that he suffered a dent in his skull as a result of the second fight. Were a lot of empty promises made by his old buddy, Tay Jones, that Deontay Wilder would come forward with this information. He never did.
Not yet.
All we're seeing is that Fury versus Joshua is off, and Fury versus Wilder 3 is on. That's it. If I didn't know better, I'd think that this controversy is a manufactured controversy intended to give the third fight some more sizzle, because without that, it's cold product.
You fought this guy 2 times, you haven't beat him yet.
And the last fight, the second fight, that was supposed to settle it. That was supposed to settle it for the both of you. He left no doubts in the second fight until this controversy, what I think is a manufactured controversy, surfaced.
And who fed that controversy to those YouTubers?
I mean, who do you think? Where did it all come from? Where did it start?
I think the whole goddamn thing's a gimmick.
A marketing angle to sell a third fight that otherwise would be cold product. And here and now, given how angry a good chunk of the boxing community is that we're not going to get to see the undisputed title fight late this summer. We're not. We're going to get a repeat, a three-peat of Wilder versus Fury. I question how well this fight will do at the box office. Controversy and everything, because this fight really only appeals to Wilder's fans. Fury's fans wanted to see him go in there and fight Anthony Joshua.
Yeah.
They thought that this chapter in the story was over. A good number of those Brits feel jilted. A good number of those Brits feel used and lied to, because the whole time that Tyson Fury was calling out Anthony Joshua, at minimum, he knew that there was a mediation arbitration going on with Deontay Wilder, and he knew the nature of that mediation arbitration. It wasn't for a payout. It was for a fight, and you knew that. And in spite of knowing that, you still thought it prudent to call out Anthony Joshua?
Why?
You thought it prudent to fake the funk? The cat's out of the bag now. Tyson Fury's reputation has taken a critical hit with the British boxing fans.
So can they be relied on to finance this fight?
This is another fight set to take place on U.S. soil. Supposed to be Allegiant Stadium sometime in July or August. Those are 2 days they are playing with. Though I do question, controversy and all, if this is going to be a tough sell. Because this is not what the world was waiting to see. You have to understand that. The world was smacking their lips at the prospect of Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. That's not what they're going to get. They're going to get a three-peat, a trilogy between Wilder and Fury. And you can say that Wilder's in the right and he has justifiable cause, that Daniel Weinstein ruled in his favor and he only wants the same opportunity to win his belt back that Anthony Joshua was given with Andy Ruiz. You can say all those things, but none of those things are compensation for what fight fans wanted to see and what they're not going to see. They're not going to see Undisputed this summer.
A lot of them feel slighted by Tyson Fury.
The ones most interested in this trilogy are Deontay Wilder's fans. That being said, the second fight was a box office flop.
Yeah, I don't really know what this thing's gonna do.
And finally, I'm sure that most of you have heard the news by now. A rather unexpected bit of news. Per tweet from Mike Kopinger, Manny Pacquiao has signed the contract for an August 21st welterweight title fight with Errol Spence Jr. in Las Vegas. Done deal. Massive fight. And at 42, the legend takes on the best 147-pounder in the world. PBC on Fox pay-per-view. Pacquiao made the announcement with a promo poster. I have so many questions. I wonder that the WBA won't make the decision to reinstate Manny Pacquiao as the full-fledged WBA champion at this weight, it being that he was relegated to being a champion in recess, having not fought since the Keith Thurman fight. He won that WBA title, but he didn't defend it. Manny Pacquiao won the WBA title from Keith Thurman in July of 2019. He was relegated to being a champion in recess in January of this year, having not fought since he won the title. The fight with Errol Spence Jr. is set to go down August, mid-August, late August, you know. That being said, it will have been a full 2 years the night of the fight. Manny Pacquiao is currently 42 fucking years old.
I really wasn't expecting this.
I wonder that the WBA won't make the decision to reinstate Manny Pacquiao as their full-fledged WBA champion at this weight, given the size and scale of the fight. Let's not kid ourselves. The WBA, the WBC, they make up these fucking rules as they go along, and they bend them and reappropriate them all the time. I wonder that we won't see something like that happen in the days, weeks, and months leading up to the fight in August. I wonder if Manny Pacquiao requires $40 million up front the way he required $40 million up front for a Crawford fight. You guys remember those reports from a few weeks ago that Manny Pacquiao was willing to take on Terrence Crawford? He just required $40 million up front to do it. And we all know that all of those talks dematerialized. That fight was dead in the water. Is he going to get $40 million to fight Errol Spence Jr.? Or is he willing to accept less money to take on Errol because he doesn't view Errol as being as great a threat to him as Terrence Crawford? Lest we forget, Manny Pacquiao, based on reports, he said he needs $40 million to fight Crawford, whereas with Errol, he characterized Errol Spence Jr. as being too slow.
Hey, he said it, not me.
So you have to wonder, was he willing to accept less up front for a Spence fight than a Crawford fight because he doesn't view Errol Spence Jr. as being the same threat to him as Terrence? I'll tell you something. Manny Pacquiao fighting Terrence Crawford, Manny Pacquiao fighting Errol Spence Jr., either opponent option is a testament to his greatness. So this is in no way, shape, or form intended to slight Manny Pacquiao so much as characterizing the decision.
Why one and not the other?
What went into that decision? This is being billed as a Fox pay-per-view, so that lets us know the status of their relationship, it being that we've been waiting on Fox to come out with a schedule for their PBC programming for a while now. Nothing has come out as of yet, save this. This recent news. Very shrewd business move from Al Hyman securing this fight. I gotta say that, Bob Arum, he's been dropping the ball quite a bit lately. Can't seem to get a high-profile fight for Terrence Crawford. The kerfuddle with Teofimo Lopez and the attempted collusion associated with the George Kambosos purse bid. A lot of people are pissed off at Bob over this past Monday's announcement that Tyson Fury ain't going to be fighting Anthony Joshua. He's going to be fighting Deontay Wilder. I don't want to poo-poo all over Top Rank like they haven't been giving us good fights and like they're not about to give us a really great fight this Saturday, but I'm noticing that they're dropping the ball quite a bit over there. Regardless of what you think, the people over there at PBC, at least in the welterweight division, have managed to once again one-up Top Rank in their fighter, Terrence Crawford. I mean, you wonder what the hell are they going to do for this guy? Is it time to jump ship?
No Porter fight.
No Pacquiao fight. No Spence fight. No nothing.